Hello, welcome to Nexla, the only no-compromise enterprise-grade ETL and data operations platform. In this demo, we will take a quick look at how you can use Nexla to easily move data from anywhere to anywhere, configuring it to read and write exactly what you want, when you want, and how you want it, all without having to write any code, unless you want to. We will also look at some Nexla capabilities beyond basic ETL that are targeted at error management, re-ingestion, workflow management in a team, and audit logs for bookkeeping. So let's dive in. This is the dashboard you will see when you log in. This view displays recent information about all the running data flows for this account. We'll come back to this view at the end of the demo. First, let's set up some flows. Sources is the start of your data flow. Here you can create and monitor all your resources for reading data. Let's create a new source by clicking this button. You can use Nexla to read data from anywhere. File systems like S3, FTP, Dropbox, databases like Redshift, Snowflake, SQL, any REST or SOAP APIs, and I mean really any APIs from Salesforce, Marketo, Zendesk, Zillow. We'll take a look at them in just a minute. You can also push data to Nexla directly by creating a webhook. Now, not only can you configure Nexla to read data from any type of source, you can configure it to read exactly what you want. Let's look at S3 and API sources. Let's connect to my S3 source. I can enter credentials or use an existing one. In this screen, I have connected to my S3 bucket. This view shows all the files in my S3 location. I can click on a file to get a quick preview. With Nexla, you don't need to ensure your source has only one type of data. Nexla has artificial intelligence built in to detect schema types and to detect changes in schema to notify users when a schema has changed. Point the source to any path, and the platform will smartly detect one or more types of datasets or schemas from a multitude of file formats. But along with the simplicity, there is also the power of fine-tuned control. I can configure how frequently this location should be scanned for new data. I can whitelist and blacklist paths to control which files are read. And while the platform can smartly detect schemas from most file formats, from EDI to Excel, I can even tightly control how this file should be read. Once I have made my selections, I just click on Create, and Nexla will go about trying to read this location at every regular frequency cycle for new data. Let's look at this previously created source. I can see Nexla read these files and detected two distinct schemas. Let's say a week from now, a new file is dropped into this location. Nexla will read the file and, depending on the data, either send it through to one of these existing datasets or create a brand new dataset. In this case, I know new stock CSV file will be added to this location. Without requiring me to do anything on the source, Nexla will automatically read that file when it is added to my S3. What if a requirement change and I need to reconfigure this source? I can pause and edit the source to new settings. And if I need a similar source with new settings, just copy and start fresh. Before we move on to using the detected datasets, let's quickly look at how this would work if I had an API source. Nexla offers a uniquely powerful way for connecting with data APIs. A simple setup is all it takes to connect to almost any API and start leveraging that data. Let's take an example. I have an API from the movie database that gives a list of trending movies over a day. I'll plug that API in here and I get a sample response from the API. If this is exactly what I want, great, I'm done. But I know this API requires paginated requests. It will never return all the records in one go. I can set Nexla to iterate over page numbers till all the data for this fetch cycle has been retrieved. Now, what if I wanted each movie as a separate record? For this API, that means each element of the results array is a record. Easy. I can use these smart path tokens or type in my own JSON path or XML path to tell Nexla exactly what part of the response should be treated as a dataset. Okay, but what if I want to fetch more details about each of these movies and save that as a record? For this API, I need to use the ID of each movie and call another TMDB API endpoint. Well, Nexla supports API chaining. So all I have to do is add another step and set the URL by using the parameter from the response of the previous stage, which here is the movie ID. And voila! This is a sample record that will be stored as a dataset by Nexla. From now on, at every cron cycle that can set up on the top, Nexla will call TMDB API to fetch the full list of latest movies, no matter how many pages, and then fetch details for each movie. Okay, one final thing about API sources. Just like file sources, once I have set them up, I get a full ingestion history of that source. How many records were ingested, how many errors were detected, what was the dataset found. Let's skip the other source types as they all allow similar controls and information. Now that we have configured Nexla to ingest data, let's go to the fun part of mapping and moving the data around. Let's start with the detected dataset. I can look at the schema, annotate it for bookkeeping, or I can derive a dataset out of it and move it to any destination. We prepare the data mappings in the schema editor or mapper. I can create mappings in 3 different modes based on my needs. Let's start with the powerful transform builder. Create complex mappings with simple drop-down UI elements. If I want to move this attribute as is, click and add. If I want to create a more complex if-else condition, for example, if this attribute is equal to buy, output yes, else output no, I can use this pre-built Nexla function. And apply. If I want to add some filters for dropping records, say I only want to pass through records if these symbols match. I can do it all with the builder. This builder is a big library of pre-built functions and we are constantly adding to it. But what if someone in your team is comfortable with Python or JavaScript coding? You can use the custom code option to type your code. All the pre-built Nexla functions are available as snippets for you to use. And if a transform is something you need frequently, you can save it as a reusable transform and use it on any relevant dataset. Once you have created attribute mapping transforms, you can choose to send it to any of the Nexla destinations, file systems, APIs, databases. As with sources, the destinations are completely configurable. You can control where and in what format data is written. Let's look at the database destination. I want to push this to my SQL table. I can choose to insert or upsert to an existing table. Or, in this case, because I don't have one and I have database permissions, I can set Nexla to create a table while writing this data up. As with sources, there is full history on every data write attempt made by Nexla. Let's look at a powerful Nexla feature of lookup tables. These are fast in-memory lookups. The platform allows creating static or dynamic lookup tables. Let's say I have a mapping of company tickers to company names. If changes to that mapping are in my control, I can create a static lookup table and add entries there. If the mapping is coming from another stream, say an API, I can set up a data flow like we saw earlier and choose a dynamic lookup destination for that flow. Once the lookup has been configured, I can use it in a few different places. Say, if I had to orchestrate an ingestion where I needed these tickers as parameters to restrict ingestion, I can use that. I can use it in the schema editor. For example, if I had to create transforms where the input data set had the ticker and the output needed some company name or some other value for that company. That was one flow. Now, what if I have set up 10 of these over time? As you can see, I already have quite a few flows in this account. And I have no idea what source writes to what destination. In the flows view, I can look at all my data flows, zoom into one resource, and view its upstream and downstream connections. So now I know Nexla detected 219 records in this source, found 2 datasets, one of which had 31 records, of which 4 went into this lookup. I wonder why only 4 of the 31 went into the lookup. Let's see. I can go into the detail view. Open it in edit mode. And aha, I have some filters. No wonder why only 4 made through. And I can navigate back and forth between flows and the resource. Great, now we have set up our flows and know how to navigate across them. But we know that basic ETL setup is not the end of the story ever. Things change. Maybe the input source data changed because the vendor API was down for some time, or there were a few records in my input data that did not make it through my transform rules. Let's look at some Nexla features that are targeted towards everything beyond ETL. First up, errors and notifications. Nexla generates notifications for a whole range of events. For example, ingestion, new schemas detected, anomaly detection logic to alert about significant increase or decrease in data. You can configure delivery of account level notifications here. But beyond that, you can also fine-tune notifications for some special resources that supersede the rules here. So let's say I have hundreds of sources and a few of them are mission critical. I can just set data volume change alerts for those few and keep my inbox clean of noise. I can view notifications for any resource in its tabs. Let's dive deeper into errors. There was an error on my source. I got an email from Nexla about the error along with a deep link to that resource. I log in and here I have the notification. But I can also look at that error data. What error happened on which input record? In the error tab, I can preview the error data and let's see. Oh, I see. There was a problem with line item 48 of this file. If a file failed ingestion and I want to re-ingest it all over again after the fixes, all I have to do is trigger the re-ingest action. Even for APIs and databases, I get full history of read and write attempts. So for this API, I can see if it failed on any day. I have corresponding notifications and errors for why. Another key feature is audit logs. Nexla provides access control settings so you can give read or write access to other people in your organization. And so to keep tabs on knowing exactly what configuration of a resource was changed, when and by whom, there is full audit log. I can see this API was reconfigured by me and that the URL was changed. Finally, let's come back to the dashboard. Whenever I sign in, the dashboard is a high-level overview of all the recent things happening in my account. The flow summary, which tells me how many records were ingested in the last 24 hours per flow and how many were written out. Any flow that needs my attention because it had errors will be up top in red. Data volume read and write summaries are there to know how much data is flowing through Nexla and most errors and notifications for me to look at. So that was an overview of how to use Nexla. If you haven't tried out Nexla yet, I hope you will. Sign up by going to www.nexla.com and let us know your needs. We are constantly introducing new capabilities towards making it a no-compromise platform that works for all your data needs.